Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we are painting peonies and it is day 18 of our 30 days of watercolor flowers, so let's get started. So to start with a little bit of color theory, I wanted a dusty rose color for my peonies, and so I'm starting with a pink and I'm adding some greenish blue to the mixture. The complement of red is green, so when you add that complement, it makes it a more muted color. The easiest way to paint peonies is starting with the outside petals and not with the inside petals like we do with the rose or the ranunculus. So we're imagining the stem towards the bottom, right? So we're creating these kind of rough and loose shapes that fan out more towards the top of our paper and then are coming down more at a point towards the bottom of our paper where the stem is going to connect with these petals. As we come around the top of the flower, we're painting petals that are they're shorter, they're wavier. We're wanting to maintain the white space between the layers, but we're also wanting to keep white space in the middle for the big yellow center of the flower. And as we come down the side of the flower, we're keeping the strokes really thin because we're imagining that we are seeing a petal from the side. So now that we've reached the bottom of the peony, we can create these petals that kind of fan out more. Peonies stay pretty tight towards the center, and so once we get to the bottom, we can have those flower petals that are more open and full. Again, keeping it really loose and organic with your shapes. Try not to overthink it and just have fun. So now I'm going through with a slightly darker pigment of pink to add more contrast and blending up into the petals. I'm also noticing any areas where the white space looks awkward, like a petal is completely disconnected from the flower, and so I'll connect some of the spaces with each other and remove some of the white space and just make sure that there's still white space, but it looks a little bit more natural. Okay, so I'm going to paint another peony where we can't see the center as much. And as I'm painting these petals, I'm really just going up and down and differing the width and size and the white space. I'm doing a wavy stroke for those petals along the top, and I'm not connecting them to the petals in the front because the white space signifies different layers. Again, for the petals along the side, we're going to do really thin strokes to signify a petal that we're looking at sideways. And even though we like white space, I'm connecting some of those petals in the middle of that sliver of white space so that they don't look like they're just floating in the air. And now that we're at the bottom of the flower, I'm creating a few open and more wide petals just at the base. And again, for this peony, I'm adding some darker pigment towards the bottom of the petals and removing some of the white space that feels a little bit awkward, connecting the petals, adding little lines here and there for detail and anything that I feel like needs a little fixing up. And now I wanted to add a peony bud up here at the top to fill this gap, and I'm keeping the edges up at the top really uneven to signify different petals kind of folded together. And now for the greenery. So I'm doing these little leaves with a one-stroke technique right at the base of the peony. So the one-stroke technique is you start with light pressure at the tip of your brush, push down on your brush to create the body of the leaf, and then slowly let off pressure to create the end of the leaf with the tip of your brush. And keeping these strokes very light and wiggly and uneven helps them look more organic and realistic. Now I'm painting the long, smooth stems of the peony, and I have found that anytime you can slightly curve the stem of a flower, you increase how natural it looks. And I'm using one of the stems to create the stem coming up for the bud, touching it up to the top, but since it's already dried, we're not going to really have any bleeding moments, and so I'm going to create the little leaves that hug around the bud of the peony. The more light and curved and uneven you can create your strokes when you're painting these leaves, the more, again, natural things will look. So when it's time to finally paint leaves on a piece, I look for the awkward gaps and I look for height. So there needs to be a leaf down here and there's going to be a leaf higher on the other side up here towards this peony. And again, I'm using my two-stroke method. I'm doing the same maneuver as the one stroke, light at the beginning, heavy on the pressure in the middle, light at the end, but I'm doing two strokes, leaving white space in the center, and then bringing both of those strokes together to create the leaf. And there still was an awkward gap up here by the bud, so I decided to create a tiny leaf up there as well. Now I'm going through with a slightly darker pigment of green and adding just a little bit more contrast to the greenery as I go around. So I'm thinking about shadowing, I'm thinking about where highlights would be. I'm making sure that these stems here, one is darker than the other so that we can see where they differentiate, and adding this extra contrast and color to your piece really makes it pop. Now with a light wash, I'm adding a little bit more details to the petals, and I'm keeping this really random and loose. I don't want it to look forced or overworked. I just want some of the petals to have a little bit more contrast and not look like one big blob. And my favorite part of painting peonies is adding the yellow centers. So just keep your lines really quick and sharp with the tip of your brush, and it will look really natural, keeping everything random while still maintaining the white space. And now that we have finished practicing our peonies, I'm adding them to my watercolor flower guide, and I chose to do one that was slightly open so we could still see that nice beautiful yellow in the center, but it still has lots of beautiful full petals. And when I went in to add that yellow to the center, I dropped my brush and got yellow all over the peony, but I used paper towel and water and some very well placed leaves to cover it up. And that is it. Thank you so much for being here today while we painted peonies together. And it is day 18 of our 30 days of watercolor flowers. I can't wait to see you tomorrow for day 19. Bye.